Hey guys! Tonight we slip beneath the paper-thin doors of a 17th century Korean scholar's study, where the oil lamp flickers and the air smells faintly of pine ink and damp wood. You're wearing layers of starched robes that rustle with every step, and your legs ache from hours of kneeling in perfect posture. Your eyes are tired not from the day's labor, but from staring too long at the delicate curves of Hanja characters. Outside, the rain taps steadily on the tiled roof, a soft, syncopated lullaby. And inside? Well, inside, it's time to rest. You're about to experience what few people today ever do. The bedtime routine of someone who believes that sleep isn't just necessary, it's part of your moral character. The lamps, the garments, the bedding, even how you position your limbs. It all says something about who you are. Or at least who you hope your ancestors think you are. And, yes, spoiler, the mattress is thin, the pillow is harder than your philosophy teacher, and you will dream about scrolls. You probably won't survive this if you're used to memory foam. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the time you're watching in the comments. I love seeing how far these sleepy little stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rain hasn't let up. You slide the wooden door shut behind you and stand for a moment in your scholar's study, the sarangche, though we'll get to that in the next section. It smells of dry paper-scorched wick and the faint sweetness of preserved persimmons. The walls are lined with scrolls and brush pots, and on the far side of the room is your sleeping area. A folded mat, neatly layered blankets, and one small bamboo pillow that looks like it could double as a torture device. You shrug off your day robes and carefully fold them, not because you're a neat freak, but because leaving them in a heap would be a moral failing. Confucianism doesn't mess around. Every detail of your life must reflect harmony and order. Yes, even your dirty laundry. You change into your sleep robe. It's undyed cotton, hand-stitched a little itchy and absolutely devoid of flair. No embroidery, no bright colors, just plain, dignified white. The kind of outfit that says I'm ready to reflect on my flaws. Also, it's not warm. You shiver and pull the robe tighter. The stove burned out an hour ago, and the only heat left in the room is your own stubborn body heat, and the faint embers beneath the ondol, those underfloor heating stones that once felt luxurious and now just feel metaphorical. You kneel before your sleeping mat and recite a short prayer. You thank your ancestors, your teacher, and that one ink merchant who didn't overcharge you last month. You bow, touching your forehead gently to the floorboards, then settle yourself onto the bedding. It creaks faintly beneath your weight. The quilt smells faintly of cedar. Your servant laid a sprig beneath it last week to ward off moths. You lie on your back legs, straight hands folded just below your chest, like a very polite corpse. This is technically the ideal sleeping posture according to some ancient texts, although historians still argue whether that came from medical wisdom or aesthetic paranoia. You shift. The pillow digs into your neck. You shift again. It digs harder. You sigh. And outside, the rain answers with a sympathetic whisper. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. You try not to be annoyed. You've spent your day composing poetry and copying out treatises. You told a student that wisdom begins with humility, and ended a letter with a line about still waters flowing deepest. So you really can't be mad about a little canine enthusiasm, even if the barking sounds like it's directed at your soul. The oil lamp sputters. You sit up and trim the wick just like your grandfather taught you. There's something satisfying about the hiss of the flame. You let your fingers hover near it for warmth before tucking back into bed. The paper doors rattle slightly in their frames. Wind again. You pull the quilt to your chin and stare at the ceiling beams. They're carved from pine, not for luxury, but because they're strong and straight, the architectural equivalent of moral integrity. You count the knots. You wonder whether they mirror your own flaws. You wonder if that's something Confucius would say, then mentally scold yourself for being dramatic and sleep comes slowly. Your thoughts swirl in slow, inky loops. Fragments of verse half-memories, the smell of plum blossoms from last spring. You hear the soft drip of rainwater from the eaves outside. Maybe it's hitting that old ceramic pot, the one you keep meaning to move, or not move. You forget. You close your eyes. You adjust your arms. You try to breathe evenly like your meditation teacher told you. Deep, belly breaths from the danjon. You forget if you're doing it right. Probably not. You breathe anyway. A cat howls 2 courtyards over. You think about writing a line of poetry to describe that sound. You decide against it. Too tired, and besides the inkstone's cold. As the room darkens, the rain slows to a murmur and you begin to drift not just into sleep, but into a space between thoughts. The kind of half-dream where time has no edges and even your pillow seems slightly less judgmental. Tomorrow you'll wake early. You'll clean your brush, copy more lines. Critique yourself gently but thoroughly. But for now, you are a scholar alone in a quiet room, and the night is long and uncomplicated, just like it should be. You shift again beneath the quilt as the wind hums across the eaves. It's not quite a song, more like a whisper from the beams themselves. You tell yourself it's probably just the draft, but you half wonder if it's the spirit of Yi Huang passing through, disappointed that you didn't finish your commentary on the analects. Again. You blink slowly, your breath shallow, and feel the silence settle. This is the sarangche, the scholar's private retreat. Not just a room, but a symbol, a sanctuary, a statement. It's where you read, write, and try very hard to pretend that your joints don't ache when kneeling for 6 hours straight. Technically, it's part of the larger Hanak house, but the sarangche is always slightly apart, a step removed. A quiet space like an island floating in a sea of family noise and social expectations. Unlike the women's quarters, the anche, the sarangche, belongs to the man of the household. Or more precisely, to his mind. You don't eat here, or laugh here, or lounge around in disheveled robes with friends. This space is for study, contemplation, and extremely solemn naps. The floorboards creak only when permitted. Even the dust seems better behaved. In the far corner is your writing desk, low and elegant, its legs shaped like lotus stems. The inkstone is cleaned, brushes hung with bristles down, and last night's scroll still left halfway open. You remind yourself not to leave them like that. They can curl under the humidity or worse, attract silverfish. You make a mental note to scold yourself in the morning, but for now you're focused on the bed, which is really just a layered mat set directly on the andal-heated floor. It's simple, austere, moral. At least that's what your teacher always said. Softness weakens the soul, he told you once while sipping plum wine in a visibly overstuffed cushion chair. Outside, a gate creaks. Perhaps the gardener returning late. Or a fox. Or your conscience. The sarangche walls are made of thick wood and hanji paper, translucent but surprisingly sturdy. You like to believe that the shadows passing outside don't notice you watching. You've memorized the grain of each wall panel, the way moonlight falls across them in different seasons. In winter, it turns silver. In summer, a warm gold. Tonight, the glow is soft and gray, filtered by clouds. Above your bed hangs a modest scroll, an ink wash of bamboo, and a short poem in brush script. It was a gift from your teacher. The characters read, "Even in stillness the breeze bends." You don't remember what that means exactly, or if it ever meant anything, but it's pretty, and sometimes in your half-dreams the leaves on the scroll rustle. Not literally, of course. That would be unsettling. Your feet nudge the edge of the bedding and you wince as your heel grazes the colder part of the floor. The andal stones lose heat quickly when the fire burns out. You remember once reading a debate about whether the warmth of a scholar's floor influenced his work ethic. Historians still argue whether colder floors led to more ambition or just earlier bedtimes. As the room dims, you're aware of how incredibly quiet it is. No ticking clocks, no buzzing electronics. Just the occasional rustle of your sleeve against cotton, the far-off drip from a cracked tile outside, and your own breath. It's enough. It's always been enough. You shift again on the mat. Your back is not pleased, but you tell yourself that a little discomfort is good. It sharpens the mind. That's what Confucian discipline is all about. Modesty, order, and sleeping. like someone who feels a little guilty about everything. You think about your ancestors whose tablets are probably watching from the household altar in the next room. That's not a joke, by the way. There's a literal wooden tablet with your grandfather's name carved in it, and once a month you kneel before it offering rice and bowing 3 times. You sometimes wonder if he's disappointed in your handwriting. The wind picks up again, brushing the corner of the roof with a soft sigh. You glance at the door, knowing it will rattle once, maybe twice, before settling back into silence. You've memorized the timing. You lie still, letting the silence wrap around you like the second quilt your servant folded at the foot of the bed. You don't call him often, but he knows your routine. He knows not to speak unless spoken to, and he knows that if the oil lamp is turned down low, you're in the contemplative mood, the one where you stare into space like a ghost processing an ethical dilemma. You reach for the quilt, pull it over your shoulder, and let your thoughts slow. The serangshe is just warm enough now. The lamp sputters once, then dies, the wick curling like a spent hair. You don't move. No need. The moon is enough. Through the paper screen, you can almost make out the shape of the plum tree outside its branches, crooked and bare. In spring, it will bloom again. You've written at least 4 poems about that tree, none of them very good. Still, it waits. Like everything in this room, quiet, steady old. You wonder if you'll dream of it tonight. The serangshe breathes with you. You inhale, you exhale, and at last, sleep begins to fog the corners of your vision. You're nearly asleep when your neck sends a sharp reminder. Your pillow is made of bamboo, and bamboo does not care about your comfort. You sigh softly and shift, trying to align the vertebrae that your ancestors never mentioned in their scrolls. The bamboo pillow jukbuin, if you want to be poetic, is a narrow cylinder hollow and firm with slatted grooves for air circulation and moral uprightness. It was designed supposedly to keep your head cool and your mind sharper, because clearly what every scholar needs most is a pillow that feels like it was stolen from a monk's punishment chamber. You'd think it's something you could get used to, but no, it never gets softer. You just get better at pretending you don't mind, and yet you keep it. Because comfort in your world is something earned in the afterlife, preferably after you've perfected your calligraphy and publicly atoned for that one time you plagiarized a Tang Dynasty poem in your youth. Bamboo pillows were common among the literati of Joseon-era Korea, particularly in summer when the air turned heavy and sleep came slow. The cool surface helped wick heat from your neck. At least that was the theory. Historians still debate whether they were actually functional or just another example of aesthetic suffering turned cultural badge of honor. You've tried softer pillows. Once on a trip to the capital, you stayed in a guest house where the host gave you a buckwheat-filled cushion. Plush, cradling, slightly scented with lavender. You slept like a peasant. The shame lingered for weeks. Now back in your own study, you try once again to find the optimal angle. Chin slightly tucked shoulders, relaxed ears, not quite pinched between bone and bamboo. You lie still and let your breath settle. 1, 2, 3. Nope, that's not it. You consider turning the pillow sideways. You do not. Your teacher once said that sideways sleepers breed crooked thoughts. You didn't believe him then, but now you're not sure if he meant it literally or metaphorically. Either way, you're stuck in a moral yoga pose that feels one sneeze away from spinal regret. And still you persist. Because in your world, the way you sleep reflects the way you live. Discipline isn't something you put on for the daytime. It wraps itself around every part of your existence, like the thin cotton robe currently twisted around your calves. You close your eyes again and try to imagine something soft. A cloud, a blanket. That moment in the afternoon when sunlight slants across your desk and warms your inkstones. The sound of paper being brushed with fresh ink. A student nodding in understanding. A crane flying overhead. Your mind drifts. The pillow holds firm. And just when you think you've lost the fight again, a breeze sneaks through the corner of the paper window. It brushes the hair at your temple and lifts the edge of your blanket just enough to remind you the world outside is moving. The bamboo creaks faintly beneath your neck, not from your weight, but from the shift in humidity. You've read somewhere that these pillows are supposed to last decades. One of your mentors claimed he'd passed his down through 3 generations. You try not to think about that. Your fingers twitch against the edge of the quilt and you curl them in. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a night heron croaks. Loud, raspy, and incredibly out of tune. You snort. Even in sleep, the natural world refuses to be elegant. Your thoughts circle back to Confucius because they always do, and you recall one of his lesser-known quotes. At night rest. In rest reflect. In reflection restrain. Or was it refine? You forget. Either way, it's a quote that pairs beautifully with a pillow that discourages indulgence. The truth is, no part of your sleeping arrangement is meant to encourage luxury. The mat is thin, the blanket is plain, and the pillow is, let's be honest, slightly punitive. But that's the point. In the hierarchy of values, comfort falls somewhere below self-improvement, filial piety, and probably brushing your teeth with salt water. You breathe deeply. The air smells of pine ash, old books, and a faint hint of sesame oil from the kitchen beyond the courtyard. Your stomach growls. You ignore it. Late-night snacks are for merchants and revolutionaries. The pillow presses against your neck like a disapproving ancestor. You wonder if dreams come easier to those who surrender to the discomfort faster. You wonder if perhaps the dream state is the only place where a bamboo pillow becomes silk, where the scholar becomes a cloud, where ink flows without drying, and wisdom drips from the sky like summer rain. You're not there yet, but maybe you're getting closer. Outside, the wind fades. The tiles no longer rattle. The serangshe is still. Even the cat seems to have lost interest in making noise. You try one last shift, just a small tilt of your head, and for the first time in what feels like hours, your spine aligns. Just so, you exhale. Your fingers loosen. Your breathing deepens. And the bamboo holds you not softly, not gently, but with the kind of quiet, unyielding support only a 17th century scholar could appreciate. Your body now reluctantly still rests atop layered bedding, each fold placed with care, each layer calibrated to the season. In summer, it's reed mats woven tight and cool, slick against bare skin and resistant to sweat. In winter, it's wool and cotton, quilts heavy with stitched patterns that only the moonlight can admire. You shift slightly, hearing the soft crunch of the straw mat underneath the quiet exhale of bedding that has supported generations of ambition. Sleep in this century isn't merely a pause between activities. It's a calibrated seasonal routine, almost ceremonial. Bedding is changed with the calendar, not the thermostat. And there is no thermostat. Just the wind, your bones, and the fire pit's memory. Tonight, it's the end of early spring, and the cold has lingered longer than expected. Your servant, ever discreet, added a woolen quilt without being asked. You didn't thank him. Not because you're ungrateful, but because in this house, silent service is the rule. The gesture speaks for itself. You'll repay him with a warmer look tomorrow morning. Maybe even a half smile. Scandalous. As you settle under the weight of the bedding, your feet graze the stitched edge of the bottom quilt, a familiar pattern of chrysanthemums faded from years of use. You always tug that one a little higher. It belonged to your father. You don't say that aloud. You wouldn't say that aloud, but you always sleep better when it's draped over your knees. The layered bedding serves more than one purpose. It insulates. It anchors. It reminds you of your place. Comfort, yes, but not indulgence. Never indulgence. Even the weight of the covers feels like a whisper. Remember who you are? Historically, scholars of your time believed that seasons shape the temperament. Hot summer nights required you to be more diligent, less sleep, more midnight study under moonlight. Winter, on the other hand, was a time to restore and reflect. You tell yourself that's why you've allowed yourself 2 quilts tonight. Not because you're cold. Certainly not. And anyway, layering bedding is an art. There's the base straw mat, stiff and clean. Then, a cotton underlay for minimal softness. Then your primary sleeping quilt. And above that, the seasonal blanket carefully weighted to stop drafts from crawling into your spine like regrets. Historians still argue whether the quilt hierarchy was standardized across households or simply a matter of personal neurosis. You suspect it's a little of both. Your head rests on the bamboo pillow. Yes, still. And your arms lie gently atop the middle layer of covers. You try to keep one shoulder uncovered. Something about balance circulation or maybe just habit. You're not sure. Your teacher once explained it, but you were too tired to listen. Irony. The room is cool, not cold. Just enough to make you appreciate the layers. The warmth isn't immediate. It creeps in, slowly, earned, like praise from a stern uncle. You exhale through your nose and feel your chest rise against the quilt. You notice the little draft where the floorboards meet the wall. You notice everything because in this quiet, the body becomes radar scanning for the tiniest change in air texture temperature. Your fingers curl against the hem of the blanket. You remember a lesson once about bedding rituals in the north where winters are harsher. Some scholars would heat stones and wrap them in cloth, placing them at the foot of the bedding before sleep. You've tried it once or twice. The warmth never lasts the night, but the idea of it does. You like that? A warm gesture, fading slowly just enough to carry you through the first dreams. And then there's the sound of cloth. Not just the bedding, but your nightrobe, which rustles with the smallest movement. Every fold feels intentional. Every tug echoes centuries of scholarship men who once slept under similar roofs, reading the same poems, arguing silently with the moon about ethics and fate. You wonder if your grandfather slept like this, if he laid in bed and listened to the rain in the same rhythm, if he thought about how the softness of a wool quilt could feel like an indulgence. You wonder if he judged you for the second layer. You wonder if he used 3. Outside, the rain begins again, light this time, like the sound of calligraphy strokes on parchment. A familiar rhythm. You breathe with it. Inside, your breath warms the layers. The quilt rises, falls, rises. A slow tide. And with each breath, your thoughts grow duller, softer, like scrolls slowly rolling closed. You shift gently beneath the layered bedding, adjusting the stiff collar of your nightrobe. The plain cotton one, bleached white, slightly rumpled from wear. It's the kind of garment that would earn no attention in the daylight, and that's the point. It's intentionally modest, designed to reflect a man who seeks virtue over vanity. Still, it itches a little around the neck. Your daytime robes are folded neatly beside the writing desk sleeves, a lined collar tucked. That too is part of the sleep ritual. You can't simply throw off the day's garments in a heap like a peasant on a festival binge. No, your outer robe was loosened with care. Your belt hung on its wooden peg. Your inner tunic smoothed of wrinkles before being laid flat, like a letter you intend to return to. Now dressed in your sleeping clothes, you feel somehow more exposed. Not in a physical sense. Your nightrobe covers nearly everything from throat to ankle, but in a philosophical one. Without the weight of silk or formality, you are just a man again. A man with cold toes and a growing sense that he didn't study enough today. The cotton robe is unadorned. No brocade, no patterns, no signs of rank. It's thick enough for spring, but thin enough to be worn under heavier layers in winter. The sleeves are wide, not for flair, but for air. And when you move, they whisper against your side, like the pages of a book closing. Clothing in your world is more than utility. It's a moral declaration. And what you wear to bed says, I take even rest seriously. Your robe may be simple, but it is meticulously kept. You launder it yourself every 5th day using water drawn from the well and soap made from ash and rice husks. The process is meditative. The stains ink smudges near the cuff usually are reminders that you lived your values today, however imperfectly. And yes, you've thought about softer robes. There was a silk-lined nightcoat once gifted to you by a government official. You wore it twice and felt like a fraud each time. It now serves as lining for your scroll chest repurposed into something humbler. Tonight, the robe is just warm enough. The seams rest flat against your shoulders. The inner ties are knotted neatly, not tight, just enough to keep the fabric closed in case you sit up to write. You like to imagine that even in sleep, if someone were to open the door and find you half awake, you'd still appear composed, like someone whose dreams have margins and footnotes. You stretch your legs beneath the covers. The robe shifts with you. There's a crease along the back from where you folded it after laundry day, and it presses into your spine like a reminder. Everything leaves a mark, even rest. There is a saying among scholars that nighttime clothing should be silent to the ears, still to the eye, meaning no rustle, no color, no drama. You've taken it a step further. Your robe is made from fabric woven in your home village, stitched by a neighbor's daughter as part of a family offering. It's not fashionable. That would defeat the purpose. Historians still debate whether this modesty was personal virtue or social performance. You suspect it was both. You pull the quilt higher, tucking it beneath your chin, and feel the cotton robe shift once more. It's a strange comfort. Not soft exactly, but familiar. Like a passage you've read so many times, you no longer notice the awkward phrasing. Your servant has a different robe, thinner, dyed pale brown from walnut husks patched in the elbow. You noticed that last week when he knelt to stoke the fire under the ondol. You made a note to have one sewn for him next month. Not because you're kind, because it's right. There's dignity in sleeping plainly. It reminds you that no matter how many scrolls you copy or verses you recite, you are still a man, trying always, trying not to stray from the path. You wonder sometimes if Confucius slept in robes like these. Probably not. He walked barefoot through half of China and likely slept under a tree more often than on a mat. But still you like to think he would nod in approval. You close your eyes again, the fabric cool against your collarbone. The breeze has faded. The room is still outside a faint creak. Perhaps a branch settling in the wind. Perhaps nothing at all. You think of how, in this moment, your robe folds around your limbs the same way the blanket folds around your body. Like parentheses in a long, quiet sentence. Nothing loud. Nothing flashy. Just enough structure to keep everything contained. And in that stillness, you drift warmed not by luxury, but by the softness of restraint. The room dims further, your eyes growing heavier beneath the soft weight of tradition and cotton. But you're not quite ready to sleep, not yet. You reach toward the small wooden shelf near your bedding where your oil lamp flickers low flame dancing against the walls like the ghost of a thought. It's an old lamp passed down from your teacher with a ceramic base and a curved metal wick holder that always leans slightly to the left. You've never fixed it. The lean reminds you that even objects are allowed a little imperfection as long as they still fulfill their duty. You pull yourself up slightly, just enough to reach the tiny iron wick trimmer. The handle is smooth worn from years of use. You lift it and snip the charred wick with a soft click. A tiny ember flares and then vanishes. The lamp sighs as if grateful. You sit back down, your knees cracking in protest. Another reminder that you're not 20 anymore, or even 30, though your students still pretend not to notice. The flame steadies. You adjust the wick higher, and the glow spills brighter now, casting an amber puddle across your quilt, catching the rough edges of the bamboo pillow and the wrinkles in your robe. The rest of the room fades into warm shadow. Sometimes you let the lamp go out before sleep, but not tonight. Tonight you let it burn just a little longer. The moon is hidden behind cloud banks, and the Sarangche feels like the center of the world, a room floating in lamplight and silence. In the old days, before oil was easier to come by, scholars would ration their lamps carefully. A longer wick meant more light, but also meant using up expensive sesame oil too quickly. There were even competitions among students who could copy the most text with the smallest flame. That's not a joke. That's how seriously you people took your shadows. Historians still argue whether this oil rationing was out of necessity or performance. Was it really about thrift, or just a way to one-up your fellow scholars without appearing vain? Knowing your colleagues, probably both. Tonight, your oil comes from the last press of autumn's harvest, filtered 3 times, stored in a clay jar sealed with wax and marked with a red string. Your servant swore it would last through spring. He has a tendency to exaggerate. You'll find out soon enough. You glance at the far wall where the lamplight kisses the edge of your favorite scroll. It's the bamboo painting again. The brush strokes are loose, almost messy by some standards, but that's why you love it. The imperfections hum with life. Bamboo, after all, is not supposed to be straight. It bends and it creaks, but it doesn't break. You've always liked that. Sometimes when you can't sleep, you sit cross-legged in front of that scroll and try to copy it, stroke for stroke. Not just the shape, but the energy, the feeling. It never works. But the attempt is comforting. Tonight you resist the urge to rise. Your back has earned its rest. Instead, you lie still and let the lamp burn beside you, its soft light stroking your cheek with every flicker. You remember a night like this many years ago during your examination days. You stayed up so late reviewing the Confucian 5 relationships that your nose began to bleed from fatigue. Your teacher found you mopped your face with his sleeve and said, "Sleep is the 6th relationship." You still don't know if he was joking. Light in a scholar's room is not just illumination, it's symbolic. To light a lamp is to invite clarity. To extinguish it is to surrender to the unknown. But to leave it burning while you sleep, that's a rare private indulgence. A secret promise that you'll return to your thoughts as soon as you wake. The lamp makes a soft popping sound as a drop of oil flicks upward and vanishes into the air. You close your eyes, letting the glow press against your lids like warm silk. You imagine the flicker of light bouncing softly across your scrolls, your inkstones, your folded robes. Outside, the moon may have hidden itself, but here in the Sarangche, the lamp stands in its place. Not just light, but legacy. A tiny beacon, a scholar's heartbeat in flame. You take one last breath and feel the warmth of the lamp reach your forehead like a blessing. Sleep when it comes will carry that glow into your dreams. You lie still, the oil lamp flickering in its steady rhythm beside you, but your mind, traitorous tireless, refuses to shut down. Your body wants sleep, has even begun to float toward it, but some small part of you insists on reciting poetry instead. You begin softly, lips barely moving, the words spilling out in a voice that's more breath than sound. A verse by Zhang Cheol, perhaps, or maybe one of your own drafts. Though you're too tired to remember, the syllables come in waves, each one measured, familiar, like tapping your finger along the spine of a well-loved book. The insomnia is nothing new. For all your disciplined routines and herbal teas, you have never been a perfect sleeper. Some nights the thoughts arrive like polite guests. Other nights they storm in dripping, wet, shouting riddles and sitting on all the furniture of your mind. Tonight it's the polite kind, at least at first. You whisper a second verse, this one clipped from a Silla dynasty fragment. Something about lotus blossoms trembling in the dark. Historians still argue whether that line refers to actual flowers or secret political unrest. You've always preferred the flower version. Sleep remains distant. You sit up slightly, leaning on one elbow. The quilt slips down your chest and cool air kisses your collarbone. You stare toward the writing desk in the corner of the room. It's calling to you. The ink is still fresh in the stone from earlier today. You can practically hear the bristles of the brush begging for one more character. You try to resist. You fail. With a sigh that only half reaches your lungs, you swing your legs off the mat and pad slowly across the floor. The air is cold against your soles. Your bones protest, joints cracking like tiny fireworks in a quiet night. You wince. Then you glance at the ancestor tablet in the corner and murmur, I know. Just one page. You kneel before the desk, your cotton robe folding around you like a sigh. The lamp, now relocated to the table, casts a golden circle over your papers. The rest of the room falls into hush and shadow. You dip the brush. The bristles open with a soft shh sound, soaking up ink that smells faintly of pine, soot, and vinegar. And then, movement, flow. The characters arrive one by one, not with force, but as gentle visitors. You write not a letter, not a lesson, just a single sentence. Something about rain, something about stillness. The words aren't profound, but they're yours. You pause, brush hovering above the page, and feel the heavy pull behind your eyes. Your hand droops slightly. The ink pools too long on the page, forming a thick dot. A mistake. You stare at it and smile. Insomnia has been both your enemy and your muse. You've written some of your best lines on nights like this, half asleep, half regretful. One of your poems even made it into a compilation sent to the governor. You remember the title, though, not the poem. Probably for the best. In earlier years, you fought sleep with green tea, sometimes even pinching your thighs under the table to stay alert. But these days, you let the line blur. Wakefulness and dreaming feel less like opposites and more like overlapping brushstrokes. Outside, something thuds. A plum falling from a tree, perhaps, or a fox nosing around the wall. You don't startle. The night has its own rhythm, and you're part of it now. You write one more line this time without looking. A half memory from your youth. A fragment of advice from your old tutor. The mind is most honest when the world is asleep. He was wrong about many things, but you've never doubted that one. Eventually you stop, not because the ideas run out, but because your fingers grow too heavy. You blow gently on the paper to dry the ink and set the sheet aside, angled just right to avoid smudges. You cap the inkstone, rinse the brush with practiced care, and hang it with the others. Always bristles down, always. Then you rise achingly slow and return to your bedding. The mat is still warm. The quilt welcomes you without question. You slide beneath it, arms folding over your chest, bamboo pillow pressing its stern wisdom into the base of your skull. You close your eyes. This time you don't try to summon sleep. You let it come, if it wants to. If not, you have verses enough to keep you company. You lie still again. The lamp is out now, carefully pinched between two fingers, its glow extinguished with reverence, and the room has surrendered fully to darkness. But the darkness in the sarangche is never complete. Thin moonlight leaks through the hanji paper walls, soft and silver, brushing over your quilt, like the trailing sleeve of an absent friend. It's not frightening, this dark. It's shaped, contained, designed to hold you rather than hide you. You stare up into it, watching how the shadows of ceiling beams stretch long across each other, how your breath becomes visible when you exhale too sharply. Then the wind starts again. A hush at first, like the night drawing breath, and then a long, slow exhale as it slides around the edges of the wooden walls. The sarangche creaks. You know that sound? You grew up with it. It's the sigh of old timbers and rice glue, the wood adjusting to age, to cold, to memory. It's a sound that doesn't ask for attention. It just reminds you, I am here. I have always been here. You feel it in the floor beneath you, in the beams above. A low groan, like a conversation between ancestors whispered through timber. There's comfort in it, even when the roof tiles clink faintly like shifting bones. Wind is a frequent companion in spring. It brings the smell of damp earth from the vegetable plots behind the house, the scent of pine smoke from the neighbor's chimney, and occasionally the sharp musk of a wet fox passing along the rear path. The scholar in you tries not to notice, but the human in you can't help it. You remember something from an old text, one of those obscure medical treatises that never made it to the canon. The author claimed that sleeping with your head to the north and feet to the south aligned your body with the wind flow of heaven, whatever that meant. Historians still argue whether that was rooted in geomancy or just poetic nonsense. You tried it once, slept like a rock. You've kept the same orientation ever since. You never talk about it. Tonight, you wonder whether the wind agrees with you, whether it slips more gently through the cracks in your roof because your head points the right way, whether it inspects your walls, your breath, your sleep, and deems them worthy of quiet. You tug the quilt higher, though you're not cold. The paper walls ripple slightly. The hanji is tougher than it looks, made from mulberry bark pounded and soaked, then stretched and dried in the sun until it's thin enough to see through but strong enough to hold back a storm. Or pretend to. You can see the shape of a tree's shadow outside now, cast faintly through the paper panel. It sways with the wind like a calligrapher's brushstroke, elegant, wavering, beautifully uncertain. There's an old superstition one your mother whispered when you were young, that wind passing through the house at night carries voices. Not ghosts exactly, not ancestors, just voices, half-thoughts, fragments of conversations that never found endings. You used to listen for them lying awake on your side, straining to catch a syllable or a sigh. You don't believe in that anymore. Probably, but on nights like this, when the wind curls against the frame of the sarangche and hums in long, slow vowels, you think about it. Just a little. You imagine the wind speaking in the voice of your old teacher, scolding you gently for uneven brush strokes, or your father humming that folk song you never learned the words to, or maybe even yourself 5 years from now, reminding you that sleep is part of study too. The walls groan again. You shift slightly, the bedding sighing beneath you. The bamboo pillow remains, of course, unyielding in its duties. Your robe rustles softly as you curl your arms beneath the quilt. Outside, the wind rises, then falls. Like breath, like thought, like memory, inside you lie still, listening. The room no longer creaks in protest. It creaks in recognition. You've made peace with the night. The wind has died down, leaving the room in a kind of hush that feels sacred. You shift your legs gently under the quilt, the fabric rustling against the mat with a sound like distant paper folding, then contact. Your bare heel brushes the edge of the floor beyond the mat, and a chill lances straight through your spine. The floor, made of packed earth and thin stone tiles beneath the mat, is cool to the point of insult. You quickly draw your foot back, curling it under the warmth of the quilt. You mutter something unrepeatable in your head and immediately apologize mentally to your ancestors. This is the reality of a Confucian scholar's night in spring. Cold toes and cold morals both requiring regular maintenance. You think briefly, longingly of socks, woolen padded luxury forbidden socks. But socks in bed? Absolutely not. That would be excessive, indulgent, possibly even corrupt. Your great-uncle used to say, "If a man must protect his feet in his sleep, he is unfit for public service." He died of a foot infection, but still the principle stands. The floor, though simple, is a lesson all its own. Unlike modern floors cushioned with insulation and layers of fake wood, this one is honest. Its chill reminds you that nature isn't a servant. It simply is. The ondal. The traditional underfloor heating system was lit earlier in the evening, but the heat is fading. It starts near the back wall where the firebox rests and travels slowly beneath the sleeping area. By now, it's cooled just enough that the edges of the room have returned to their raw state. Earthstone silence. You pull the quilt tighter and center yourself again. Body flat, legs together. Arms crossed lightly over your abdomen like you're waiting to be carved into a Confucian statue. There's a certain humility in being reminded by the floor that your comforts are temporary. And maybe that's the point. The earth is cold. So are your toes. But your thoughts are warm, or at least mildly philosophical. The quiet returns thick now like lacquer over wood. You breathe slowly, trying not to let your mind chase distractions. But distractions are nothing if not persistent. You remember vaguely an anecdote from one of the ancient collections, perhaps the Samguk Yusa, or something even more obscure about a wandering monk who once claimed that sleep is most pure when your heels touch stone. You'd always thought that was more metaphor than practice, but tonight you feel that sharp truth in your bones, or at least your left heel. You shift again, this time carefully tucking both feet beneath the quilt's deepest layer, the one your servant warmed with a stone before bed, still faintly warm, like a memory of fire. You make a mental note to thank him with that rare thing tomorrow. Full eye contact. There's a knot in your back now, just beneath the left shoulder blade. Probably from writing too long in the evening. Or perhaps it's karmic punishment for stealing 2 dried persimmons from the kitchen yesterday. You told yourself you'd earned them. The knot disagrees. Still you lie still. A man of learning must also be a man of patience. And if that means falling asleep with his knees slightly cramping and the floor breathing frost up his spine, so be it. You've read treatises on the merits of hard sleep. They argue that discomfort strengthens the spirit, aligns the moral compass, and sharpens dreams. Historians still debate whether these texts were written from wisdom or sheer spite. Most likely both. The mat beneath you has flattened over the years, molded slightly to your body. It no longer resists you, but neither does it forgive. A proper sleeping surface like a proper teacher shows no favoritism. You run a hand lightly across the quilt fingers, tracing the stitching. It's an old pattern faded from washing, but the lines still hold. Like your beliefs? Like the slow rhythm of your breath, now steady as recitation. The cold that had crept into your foot has retreated. Or perhaps your body has simply accepted it as part of the ritual. There's something admirable about that kind of surrender. You close your eyes. The floor, the quilt, the mat. They all settle around you. Now not as obstacles, but as silent companions. You are not above them. You are part of them. And in that shared stillness, sleep becomes possible. Your body is still now the cold, no longer biting, but folded into the quiet like another thread in the quilt. Your breath is even chest rising and falling just enough to make the cotton robe shift across your collarbones. You lie there suspended between thought and sleep when a thought taps gently at the edge of your mind. You haven't done your evening bows. You sigh internally, of course. Your ancestors are watching. With reluctant grace, you sit up. Not fast, not loud. Every movement is deliberate, quiet enough not to disturb the lamp, though it's long since gone out, and quiet enough not to startle your sense of resolve. The floor is still cool as your knees meet it. You press your hands together, fingers aligned like a temple roof. Then, with the practice of decades, you bow toward the east, slow and deep, your forehead brushing the mat, the air filling with the scent of old straw and ink. The east is where the sun rises, where clarity begins. It's not a rule etched in stone this direction. It's a matter of habit, of hope. You do this every night, even when you're exhausted, even when your knees ache, even when the room feels more shadow than self. 3 bows. The first is for your ancestors, the second for your teacher, the third for the world, its vast, complicated, entirely unreasonable self. You rise again, joints whispering in protest, and sit back on the mat. Not fully reclined yet, not just yet. You take a moment to murmur quiet gratitudes, not aloud, not for performance, just in the breath between thoughts. Gratitude for the day's work for the scroll you finally copied cleanly for the student who asked a real question instead of nodding blankly. Gratitude for the plum tree still blooming after all these years. And yes, even gratitude for the bamboo pillow, though you say that one through slightly clenched teeth. There is a belief still clung to in certain circles that a scholar who forgets to give thanks before bed wakes with fogged thoughts. Historians still argue whether this was a spiritual principle or just a psychological trick. Either way, your mind feels clearer for the ritual, and clarity is more precious than comfort. You lie back down the mat, welcoming you with its usual lack of enthusiasm. The quilt finds its place. Your hands resume their position right over left, just below the ribs, like a seal stamped at the end of a letter. The room is completely dark now. No lamp, no moon. Just the faintest blue glow bleeding through the hanji screens, the kind of darkness that lets your mind finally stop looking. And yet even now your thoughts linger. What is it about sleep that invites such solemnity? Why must the transition from waking to dreaming feel like crossing a threshold guarded by expectations? You've read texts that say, dreams reveal truth, others that say they are distractions, some that warn of spirits slipping through them, some that say dreams are just digestion dramatized. You don't know which is correct. Maybe none, maybe all. You've had dreams before that felt like warnings, and others that felt like teachings. Once you dreamed your inkstone cracked in two and spilled ink across your robe. You woke the next morning and found your pen brush had split at the tip. Coincidence? You didn't think so. Tonight you feel no dream coming yet. Just the slow softening of awareness like ink spreading on damp paper. You don't resist it. Before your thoughts fully blur, you whisper one last thing. A name. Not for drama, not for longing. Just to hear it again, in your own voice. Before sleep takes even that, your lips move. The name hangs in the air for a moment, fragile and unrecorded. Then it fades, and the room exhales with you. You don't know what wakes you at first. Just that one moment you're sleeping soft, slow floating, and the next your eyes are open in the dark. No light, no sound. Just the steady beat of your heart and the vague sense that something happened. Your breath is shallow, not alarmed exactly, just present. Then you feel it. The urge. Unmistakable, unromantic. You need to relieve yourself. You blink, sighing silently. Of all the noble details of the scholar's life, ink robes, ancestral rites, this one never made it into the Confucian texts. And yet here it is, just as inevitable in the sarangche as it would be in a stable. You sit up slowly, limbs reluctant, the quilt slipping down to your waist. Cold air brushes against your skin again, and you gather the robe tighter, cinching it with the cloth sash you always keep loosely tied through the night. Then you reach beneath the edge of the mat. There it is, the porcelain chamber pot. elegant, hand-glazed, and entirely undignified. These things were common in every scholar's quarters. Quietly acknowledged, rarely discussed. Yours is decorated with faint chrysanthemum patterns, blue on white, and the tiniest chip on the base that you've never bothered to fix. When guests visit, you hide it under the shelf and pretend it doesn't exist. But tonight, like every night, it fulfills its simple duty. You shift your position, wrapping your robe around you like a modest curtain. The floor creaks softly under your weight. You do what must be done. Head slightly bowed, not from shame, but from the sheer inconvenience of it all. Outside, the wind has died completely. Not even the plum tree rustles now. The silence is so complete it almost amplifies the indignity of the moment. You resist the urge to mutter poetry about it. Still, you're grateful for not having to walk all the way to the outhouse in the pitch dark. That would involve sandals, a shawl, possibly an encounter with a startled raccoon. Historians still debate whether scholars kept chamber pots out of necessity or as status symbols. The wealthy had lacquered ones. Yours is humble, sturdy, slightly cracked, perfectly sufficient. You set it aside with care, sliding it quietly back beneath the mat. Tomorrow morning, your servant will collect it before dawn, empty it behind the east wall garden, where the soil is always dark and fertile. It's not a glamorous system, but then again, nothing about midnight relief ever is. You lie back down. The mat is cool again, and you wiggle your shoulders slightly to find the warm indent your body left behind. The quilt covers you once more, rustling faintly as it settles. Now your body is alert again. Awake in that frustrating way, where sleep feels close, but not near enough to reach without effort. Your eyes are open, adjusting to the layered darkness. You try not to think about the pot, or how the air now smells faintly of ceramic in consequence. You focus on your breathing instead. Slow, long exhales, lips barely parted. It takes longer this time. Your thoughts meander as they do in this liminal hour. You remember a lesson from your youth, your tutor warning that late-night wakefulness makes the mind a guest in its own house. You like that line, used it once in a poem. It got published in a minor journal that no longer exists. You begin counting backwards from 100 in classical Chinese, not because it helps, but because you are taught that everything worth doing is worth doing with formality. Somewhere around 74, your eyelids start to droop again. You curl slightly to your side, letting the bamboo pillow dig into your cheekbone in its usual judgmental way. Your knees pull in just a little. You won't admit it, but this position is warmer. You give yourself permission, just for tonight. Outside, something hoots an owl, perhaps, or a spirit with impeccable timing. Inside, the Sarangche sleeps again. So do you? The dream comes quietly, slipping in like mist through a cracked door. No grand entrance. No strange colors or sudden sounds. Just presence. A feeling. A shift. You're not sure when the dream begins. One moment you're lying on the mat, aware of the cold floor beneath you. The next you're in a garden that doesn't exist, at least not anymore. The plum blossoms are too bright. The sky too still. A zither hums somewhere in the background, though you never see it played. You're seated at a stone bench. Or is it a scroll unfurled across a mountain ridge? Hard to say. The dream doesn't bother to explain. Dreams never do. A voice recites something behind you. A poem you half remember. Something about clouds not knowing they're clouds. You try to turn around but find your body doesn't respond. You're rooted in place. Calm, weightless alert. You see a brush stroke itself across the air, forming characters you can't read. Not because you don't know them, but because the ink drips upward. This doesn't alarm you. Not in the dream. You're simply observing, watching your thoughts arrange themselves in metaphor. The garden shifts into a classroom, then into a library that stretches to the sky. Scrolls unravel and fly like birds. A student's face appears, then vanishes. You try to ask them a question, but your mouth is filled with water. Still no panic, just curiosity. And then you awaken. The room is dark, silent, familiar. The quilt is still across your chest, slightly skewed from your subtle dream movements. The bamboo pillow has left a mark along your jaw. You blink once, twice. That was something. You lie there still recovering from the strangeness. Your breath is slow. your heart unhurried. And yet your mind clings to the fading shapes of the dream, trying to preserve them before they slip back into the fog. You wonder what it meant. Some scholars say dreams are divine messages, fragments of cosmic wisdom disguised as absurdity. Others say they are merely the brain's attempt to untangle the mess of daily life. Historians still argue whether dream interpretation was ever truly respected in your era, or just tolerated with polite disinterest. You've kept a dream journal before, sporadically. Some entries are long, detailing entire dialogues with ancestors or imagined scholarly debates with figures long dead. Others are just single lines. The tree was on fire. No one noticed. You consider writing this one down, but your limbs are heavy again, your eyes dry. The brush would be cold, the ink reluctant. Instead, you repeat the images to yourself. Plum blossoms, flying scrolls, the upward ink, until you've branded them into memory, at least for the morning. Was it prophecy? Was it nonsense? Or was it just your mind gently whispering that your thoughts may never rest fully, even when you do? You turn your head slightly and glance toward the wall, half expecting the shadow of that imagined library to stretch across the ceiling beams. Instead, it's just moonlight again. Plain, honest, here. You close your eyes, whispering a fragment of the poem you heard in the dream. Clouds don't know they're clouds until they pass the mountain. You're not sure if you made that up or read it somewhere. Either way, it fits. Sleep begins to pull at you again, not with force, but with familiarity. The body, satisfied that the dream has passed, softens once more. And this time, when you go under, there is no ink, no scrolls, no strange benches. Just the warmth of cotton, the steady rhythm of breath, and the bamboo pressing gently against your temple like a teacher, too tired to correct you. The room is still again, but different now. Not the fresh stillness of midnight, but that thick, expectant quiet that arrives just before dawn. You can't see the sun yet, but something in your chest tells you it's coming, like a line of verse you haven't written down, but already know how it ends. You stir under the quilt. Not because you're fully awake, but because your body remembers the schedule better than your mind does. Even in sleep, your internal clock ticks in the rhythm of discipline. The rooster is late again. You listen for it. Its usual screech from 3 courtyards over, but the air remains unchanged. No hint of poultry arrogance disrupting your reverie. You smile faintly. Of all the creatures to be unreliable in a Confucian household, the rooster is the most theatrical about it. Still, you do not wait for his call. You begin to rise. The first movement is slow, more stretch than command. Your legs unfold from beneath the quilt, like scrolls, unrolling knees creaking quietly in protest. You sit up, robe rumpled hair flat on one side and upright on the other, a reminder that even ideals sleep crooked. You rub your face with both hands, not out of vanity, but to return sensation to your cheeks. The morning air is cool again, the warmth of your sleep already retreating to the folds of the blanket. You fold it back carefully, smoothing the edges as you do, because even groggy a scholar must behave like one. There's no time for lounging. That, as your tutor once said, is the sin of idleness in silk. You move toward the shelf where your daytime robe hangs. You lift it in one practiced motion, careful not to let the hem drag. Even now you do this silently, respectfully, because the walls have ears, or at least memory. The rooster finally cries. Too little, too late. You shake your head. Typical, you mutter. And then the bell sounds. A soft chime from the central courtyard, one strike meant for the household to rise. Your servant is up, likely stirring rice in the kitchen, his own robe patched and steaming near the stove. You'll greet him later. Right now, you must greet the morning. You step lightly toward the door, slide it open with care, and feel the first true breath of outdoor air on your face. The sky is not yet bright, but no longer black. It's a pale gray canvas, gently blued around the edges. You feel the promise of sunlight rather than see it a slow unfolding. In the scholar's world, early rising isn't just routine, it's virtue embodied. The Seong In, the virtuous person, rises with the sun sometimes before, to prepare both the mind and the body for the rigor of thought. Historians still argue whether this ideal was lived out consistently, or just written about loudly by the most ambitious. You suspect most scholars did their best, which is really all any of us can do. You bow once to the east. Not a full ceremonial bow, just a nod, spine straight. A quiet thank you to the unseen forces that let you wake again. You breathe in the scent of damp wood, pine needles, and morning dew. And then, without fanfare, you step back inside and begin folding your night robe. The fabric is cool in your hands. You fold it carefully, first lengthwise, then in thirds, smoothing the seams with your palm. You place it back in its chest next to the quilt you'll air out later and the dream journal you might remember to write in. There's still no real light in the room, just a softening of shadows. But that's enough. You sit at your desk again now, fully clothed, and stare at the scroll you left out the night before. It looks different now. The brush strokes calmer, the lines more intentional than you remembered. You trace one character with your finger, not touching, just hovering. The ink dried clean, and so the day begins not with alarm bells or coffee, but with breath, fabric, air, and a rooster that doesn't understand deadlines. You smile faintly. Some things never change. The chill of morning clings to your sleeves as you rise fully, but you accept it without complaint. That first blast of icy air, sharp on the skin, unforgiving on the neck, is just part of the routine. You've done this hundreds of times. Thousands. If anything, it keeps your humility intact. You reach for the small porcelain basin near your desk, its rim smooth and faintly chipped, and pour in the water your servant fetched before dawn. It sloshes quietly, pale and icy, sending a warning to your fingertips as you test the temperature. No matter the season, the morning ablution begins the same way. With cold water, very cold water. You scoop a ladleful into your hands and splash it onto your face. Instant regret, immediate clarity. It hits like a small slap from the universe, wake up scholar. Your ancestors didn't build a dynasty just so you could hit snooze. The water drips down your chin, soaking the collar of your fresh robe. You grab the linen towel and press it gently to your face. No scrubbing, no huffing, just a quiet, controlled pat-down. The towel smells faintly of barley soap and wood smoke. You glance at yourself in the small bronze mirror propped near the basin. Your hair is tousled, your eyes a little red, but your posture is straight. Your gaze, even in the early light, is firm, acceptable. Personal grooming in your time isn't about beauty, at least, not in the way it's practiced today. It's about order. Cleanliness is harmony. An unwashed scholar is a chaotic mind in cloth form. And while you may secretly daydream about warm baths and scented oils, your current situation, a cold splash and a clean towel, is the epitome of dignity. The ritual continues. You scoop more water, rinse your mouth 3 times, spit discreetly into the basin. You resist the temptation to sigh dramatically as the chill clings to your gums. Then, with a short bow to the open door and the pale morning beyond you, pick up your wooden comb. The comb is plain, dark wood smooth from years of use. No carvings, no fancy edges. It was your father's. You've kept it oiled, the teeth free of splinters. Each morning you pass it slowly through your hair, starting at the crown and drawing back with slow, deliberate strokes. Each pull is like smoothing the wrinkles from your thoughts. There's a meditative rhythm to it. Comb pause, comb breathe, comb reflect. You've read essays claiming that morning grooming is a metaphor for moral clarity. Untangle the hair, untangle the heart. Historians still argue whether that was philosophy or just poetic justification for vanity. But it doesn't matter to you. It works. When you finish, you gather your hair into a neat topknot, tying it with a soft cotton ribbon. Your hands know the motion by heart. Your mind, meanwhile, is already drifting toward the scrolls you'll review today, the student whose pronunciation needs work, the memory of that strange upward dripping ink in last night's dream. You walk to the door again. The sky is a shade lighter now, the clouds tinged with the faintest peach at their edges. No sun yet, but the promise is there. Always the promise. In your courtyard, the pine branches sway gently, their scent just beginning to reach you. You inhale deeply and feel the cold air expand in your chest. You imagine your lungs lined with frost, pure, uncorrupted air. A fresh page. You're tempted to go back inside to open the inkstone and begin writing while the house is still quiet. But no, first things first. You return to the wash basin and empty it carefully behind the side wall, where the runoff helps nourish the herb patch. You wipe the basin dry with a corner of your sleeve. That done, you tuck your hands into your sleeves and stand quietly in the doorway again, letting the moment imprint itself. The morning wash isn't glamorous. It won't be recorded in any family ledger, but it frames your day. It reminds you that even in your most private moments, there's a structure to be honored. As you turn back toward your desk, the first beam of sunlight breaks through the low clouds and slips across the wooden floor. A soft line of light no wider than a brushstroke. You smile at it. Clean face, clean robe, clean slate. Let the day begin. With the basin emptied and the robe neatly adjusted, you sit once more at your writing desk, facing the scroll you left open last night, the one you scribbled half a dream poem on before drifting off. The morning light now slips through the paper windows, faint and dappled, falling onto the desk in slow-moving streaks, like a blessing from the clouds. You pick up your brush, dip it into the water pot to soften the bristles, then pause. Not to write. Not yet. First, the journal. You pull a thin booklet from the corner of the desk. Its cover plain, the pages slightly warped at the edges. Your dream journal, or perhaps your failure journal depending on the week. This morning you open it to a fresh page. The ink is already ground. Your servant knows your rhythm. You dip the brush into the waiting inkstone and begin writing. The characters come slow, careful, your wrist still waking up. Last night you begin a bench in a garden that floated. You stop. Consider. Then continue. Plum blossoms in full bloom, a zither I could not see. Characters formed in air ink dripping upward. You pause again. I watched but could not move. The page absorbs the thoughts gently the way earth absorbs rain. You keep your lines short. You've learned that too much explanation ruins a good dream entry. Better to leave room for interpretation, or for your future self to decide what mattered. Dream journaling has become part of your mornings, not because you believe every dream is prophetic, but because they often reveal what the waking mind is too careful to admit. Patterns, images, doubts. You once dreamed repeatedly of cranes, each time larger, each time more distant. You still don't know why. Historians still argue whether scholars of your time truly believed in the meaning of dreams or merely recorded them to impress superiors. You suspect both. Some of your colleagues boast of visitations from sages in their sleep. You tend to get scrolls that argue with themselves. This morning's dream was strange, but not disturbing. It left a taste in your mouth like the last syllable of a poem you've forgotten. That's worth writing down. After the final character dries, you set the journal aside. Not closed, not forgotten, just paused. And now comes the harder part. You reach for your main record book, not the dream journal, not a poetry scroll. The accounting of the self, your personal ledger of moral progress copied each morning after waking. It contains a list of virtues you're striving toward. Patience, clarity, humility, restraint. You scan the list quickly, brush poised. Then you begin the quiet, habitual ritual of self-scolding. You note that you stayed up too late, that you indulged in 2 poems instead of 1, that you rolled to your side in sleep again, breaking the ideal posture written about in the Book of Rights. You also record the fact that you muttered at the chamber pot and briefly considered the moral value of socks. It's all there. Calmly noted without drama or shame. You've learned not to punish yourself with fire. Just with ink, it lasts longer. This daily reckoning isn't meant to be masochistic. It's meant to keep your pride in check, to ensure that no day ends without reflection. Even your better days, especially your better days, must be scrutinized. Complacency is the thief of virtue, your teacher once told you while unbraiding his beard in disappointment. You still don't know what that meant, but it stuck. You close the book not with a flourish, but with finality. It's not about perfection. It's about trying again, every day, until you die. And then, hopefully, your students carry on the effort. You breathe in deeply the scent of pine ink and morning rice drifting in from the courtyard. The day has barely begun, and already you've accounted for your dreams, measured your shortcomings, and reaffirmed your moral path. And somehow in this ritual of gentle criticism, there's comfort. Outside, the rooster has gone quiet again, probably satisfied with his lone unpunctual crow. You, on the other hand, are just getting started. You place the brush back in its slot, letting it rest gently beside its siblings, each one aligned like disciplined soldiers who never march, only whisper. The ink dries quietly on the page as you rise, stretching your arms just enough to hear your shoulders click in their sockets, like wooden joints snapping into place. It's time for the bedding maintenance. Once a week, usually on the morning of the 6th day, you perform what no scroll or verse can replace. You beat the bedding, literally, with a stick. You gather your quilts and straw mat in one slow sweep, careful not to let them drag against the dusty floor. Folded over your arm like scrolls of a more personal nature, you step out into the early light of the courtyard, blinking as the sun finally crests over the low roofline. The courtyard is small square and surrounded by the quiet architecture of simplicity. Unpainted wood, curved eaves, and the slow sway of laundry lines. You spread your quilt over a low bamboo pole and fetch the flat beating stick that hangs on the laundry hook. It's polished from use more tool than weapon, though in truth some mornings it feels like both. You raise the stick and bring it down lightly across the quilt. Thump. Then again, thump. A rhythm forms, steady, soothing, like the pulse of the house itself. Dust puffs up faint and gray. You always find this part satisfying. Scholars write endlessly about purification of the soul, but no one ever talks about the pleasure of watching literal impurities drift into sunlight and vanish. Your father used to say even the cleanest bedding hides a bug. He wasn't speaking metaphorically. Bedbugs were a common and persistent reality. But over time, you adopted the phrase as a spiritual reminder too. A good man assumes there is always a flaw to correct. A good quilt assumes the same. You flip the mat next. It's heavier, scratchier, the kind that leaves faint grid lines on your back when you sleep too long. The straw crackles under your fingers, stiff but reliable. You check for moisture mold, tiny pests. None today, just the smell of sun and use. While you work, your mind drifts. To the dream again. To the journal. To the ink dot you left too long on the page last night. You thump the mat twice. Thump, thump. There's a kind of rhythm to these tasks. Bedding maintenance, morning ablutions, moral self-accounting that has become more than routine. It's reassurance, like realigning yourself to the quiet compass of a life well-ordered. You once read that an ancient Chinese scholar tied strings around his wrists while he slept, and if his hand moved during the night, a bell would ring and wake him, reminding him not to sprawl, not to grow lax. Historians still argue whether he was revered or simply very tired. You think about him sometimes while beating your bedding, wondering if perhaps he and you would have gotten along, or driven each other mad. You finish the task and lay the bedding over the railing for one last airing. The sun touches it now, warming the creases. You imagine the heat seeping into the very fibers, burning off whatever invisible faults you left behind during sleep drool. Moral weakness, indecision. You pause to enjoy the smell. There's something oddly beautiful about sun-warmed cloth, something human and universal and completely undignified. The scent of effort, of breath, of persistence. You return the stick to its hook, the quilts to their folded form, the mat back into position. As you lay the bedding down, you run your palm across its surface, once pressing out the last wrinkles with the gentleness of closing a book. You will do this again next week, and the week after that, not because the bedding demands it, but because you do, the bedding now freshly fluffed and restored. You return to your writing desk once again, but this time not for poetry or record-keeping. No, now it's time to reckon with a larger question, one you've been dancing around for weeks, maybe months. Sleep itself. What does it mean in your world? What place does it hold in a scholar's life, shaped by rules, rituals, and relentless evaluation? You stare down at the half-filled scroll lying in front of you, your brush hovering above it like a hesitant bird. You've been drafting an essay part, philosophical musing part, structured reflection on the role of sleep in the pursuit of virtue. A title that sounds heavier than the mat you just beat the dust from. You begin writing again slowly. Sleep, you write, is not rest, it is refinement. You pause. Nod. That sounds scholarly enough. In the Neo-Confucian worldview, sleep is not simply a break from consciousness. It's a return to it, a soft pause between the chapters of effort. While most people lie down to escape the burdens of the day, a scholar is meant to carry those burdens into the dreamscape like a scroll unrolling across the stars. It's a lofty idea, but you've always been suspicious of it. Sometimes you just want to sleep. Nothing transcendent. Just rest. Is that weakness or honesty? Still, you record the common view. According to Zhu Si and his followers, dreams are reflections of your moral alignment. If your soul is clear, your dreams will be ordered and insightful. If your soul is cluttered, your sleep will be tangled, full of nonsense and temptation. Historians still argue whether anyone truly dreamed in straight Confucian paragraphs. You've had nights filled with flying frogs and upside-down classrooms. If that's moral chaos, then so be it. You continue your essay. Where there is disorder in the mind, there is noise in the night. Another solid phrase. Not entirely true, but worthy of copying by a future student, which is the real currency of scholarship. You pause and sip a little cooled tea from last night. Slightly bitter, faintly metallic. Sleep, you've decided, is where the scholar must balance theory and experience. No doctrine can make your back stop hurting. No scroll can cradle your neck. You write, "It is not that sleep teaches, it is that in sleep we remember how little we truly know." That one surprises even you. You glance toward the ceiling beams, then the plum tree's silhouette pressed faintly against the Hanji door. You think of last night's dreams of your breath sinking with the wind of the bamboo pillow that seemed to scold you in silence. Maybe that's what sleep really is for a place where no lesson can be performed, only received. You keep writing not for anyone else now, but for yourself. Your script flows freer than it has in days. You even forget the ache in your hand until the brush falters near the edge of the paper. Outside, a crow calls once sharply like punctuation. You stop, reread what you've written. The page is uneven but earnest. Sleep in the scholar's world is a space between virtue and vulnerability, between performance and truth. A space where you lie on a hard mat draped in stiff cotton beneath a flickering lamp and ask yourself whether silence is enough. It usually is. You let the ink dry and set the brush down. The essay isn't finished. But it doesn't need to be, not yet. There's always tonight. And tonight, there will be sleep again. You close the scroll gently, letting the weight of the final sentence settle into the paper. The ink still glistens faintly on the curve of one character rest, as if it too hesitates to dry. Now comes the ritual that makes your fellow scholars smirk behind closed fans. The herbal tonic. You reach toward the shelf above your desk where 3 ceramic jars rest, each sealed with paper and string. One contains dried jujube slices, wrinkled red, slightly sweet. Another holds shavings of ginseng, bitter and stubborn. And the last? A blend of lesser-known roots bark and what might be ground antler. You're not sure. Your servant swears by it, and you don't ask questions when sleep is on the line. You select 2 jujube pieces and a few curls of ginseng, drop them into a lacquered bowl, and pour in hot water from the clay kettle. It's barely warm leftover from the morning meal prep, but enough to draw the medicine from the ingredients. The aroma that rises is earthy sweet and slightly musty, like warm forest air in a library. You cup the bowl between your hands and let it steep. Steam curls up in thin spirals, catching in the sunlight that now spills more boldly through the paper doors. You sip. The taste is, well, honest. No scholar would describe it as pleasant, but it has a certain philosophical dignity. Bitter at first, then warm, like humility in liquid form. You take a second sip slower this time. Herbal tonics like this have long been part of the scholar's toolkit. Some recipes date back centuries, often passed down orally, never written, as if committing them to paper would dilute their power. Historians still argue whether they were truly effective or just elaborate placebos. You suspect it's both. The ritual alone is half the medicine. You remember once watching your teacher prepare his blend in near silence, adding each root with the precision of a calligrapher. He drank it slowly, eyes closed, and afterward said, The mind cannot sharpen if the body rusts. He also had terrible indigestion, but that's beside the point. As you finish the bowl, you place it down and press your palms together briefly in thanks. Not to a deity, just to the moment, to the hands that harvested the roots, to the servant who prepared the kettle, to the long line of tired men who also reached for sleep by way of boiled twigs. You lean back slightly, exhaling through your nose. Already the warmth begins to spread in your chest. Not a surge, nothing dramatic, just a slow unfurling, like paper releasing its curl after a humid afternoon. And here's where it gets strange. You sometimes feel watched during this moment, not by people, not by ancestors, just by the day itself, as if it's pausing to see what you'll do next. Will you work, rest, think, break the cycle? But you never do. You always finish the tonic, fold the cloth, wipe the bowl, return it to the shelf, just as you do now. Then you return to the sarangche's window and sit cross-legged on the floor, looking out into the courtyard. The plum tree has caught the sun now, each blossom glowing faintly in the morning haze. You sip the last of the tonic and let the silence wrap around you again. You don't always fall asleep easily. You don't always dream clearly. And you certainly don't always wake feeling wiser. But in this space between sip and breath, you feel something shift, a gentle alignment. Not quite enlightenment, not quite exhaustion, just readiness. The kind of readiness that says, yes, tonight sleep will be welcome. And maybe a little kinder. The bowl now rinsed and drying near the door, you ease yourself back down onto the mat, not to sleep, not yet, but to consider another rhythm in your day. The shift in your sleep schedule as seasons change. It's subtle but real. In spring, like now, you wake a little earlier, the light slipping through the hanji doors just after the rooster's sleepy complaint. In summer, you rise with sweat already forming along your brow, the night having offered no true rest. In autumn, you sleep longer, reluctantly rising with stiff limbs and thoughts that cling like the last leaves to their branches. And in winter, even a scholar gives in to the temptation of an extra hour beneath the quilt. You've never written that down, of course. You'd never admit to oversleeping on a frostbitten morning, but everyone does it. Even the most virtuous can lose to the gravity of wool. You lay your back against the mat now, arms folded behind your head, and gaze at the ceiling beams steady, unmoved, indifferent to your changing rhythms. The house doesn't judge you for sleeping later in cold months or rising earlier when the light is generous. It just creaks quietly in agreement. There's an old farmer's saying your grandmother used to whisper tucked between sips of barley tea. Sleep with the season, not with the clock. Of course she wasn't a scholar, so the lesson was dismissed as rustic wisdom, but you've never really forgotten it. Historians still argue whether seasonal sleep shifts were encouraged by Neo-Confucian texts or quietly tolerated by practical households. Some argue that early risers were glorified because rising early meant productivity, obedience, and self-control. Others suggest that deep down the entire structure bent slightly with the weather. You've come to believe that even rigid doctrine makes room for the sky. In spring, your sleep is lighter, interrupted by birds, by wind, by the sudden decision of a blossom to fall at just the right angle to plink against the roof. You don't mind. These small interruptions feel like part of the script. The season leans closer to your window each morning, tugging you awake with gentle insistence. In summer, sleep becomes negotiation. The heat pushes in through every crevice. Your robe clings. The pillow warms too quickly. You lie there, fanning yourself with a folded poem, swearing to sleep earlier tomorrow, and never quite doing it. Those nights are long, humid, and filled with the buzz of insects and unfinished sentences. You write more in the summer, but you rest less. Then autumn arrives like a reprieve. Cool air returns slicing through the last of the cicada noise. Your dreams become heavier, fuller. The mat feels welcoming again. You wake with a clearer mind, as if the breeze itself brushed away stray thoughts while you slept. Autumn is when your best essays get written and your worst ones deleted. Winter, though it humbles you, the floors are stone again. The wind howls through the beams. Your quilt becomes an argument with the world outside. Getting out of bed requires negotiation, a small motivational speech, and possibly an internal threat to your future self. Still, you adjust. The scholar bends not to fashion, not to indulgence, but to rhythm. You match your breath to the pulse of the season. Tonight, you remind yourself you will fall asleep, knowing the earth is just a little softer. The rain has passed, the wind has paused, and the plum blossoms outside your window are in their brief, perfect prime. You reach over and draw the quilt close again, folding it over your feet with the care of someone wrapping a fragile thought. And just like that, you accept what the season offers. Not just light, not just weather, but sleep that sways with the calendar. You don't fight it. You listen. The scholar must learn from the day, but sometimes the scholar must learn from the night. There's a scroll you once read, old fragile, tucked behind the local temple's storage screen, about a court scholar who refused to rise for a royal summons in the dead of night. His reason: I am purifying my dreams. At the time, you laughed. Quietly, of course. Alone in the temple corridor. Who denies the king for the sake of sleep? But now, with your head against the bamboo pillow and the memory of plum blossoms still blooming behind your eyes, you begin to understand. Maybe that scholar wasn't being dramatic. Maybe he was protecting something sacred. Because for all your talk of self-discipline and virtue, sleep is where the walls drop. And that can be terrifying, or necessary. In the scholar's world, everything is coded with meaning. What you eat, how you bow, the words you choose to omit from a letter. But sleep is the one space you don't entirely control. You can prepare for it, sure, bedding robes, lamp position. But once it takes you, you're vulnerable. Maybe that's why the dream purification story stuck. The scholar in that tale insisted that certain hours of the night, particularly just before the second watch, were vital for aligning the heart with heaven. To interrupt them was to lose a fragment of spiritual clarity that could not be reclaimed. Historians still argue whether he truly believed that, or whether it was an elaborate excuse to avoid another tedious royal audience. Either way, it worked. He kept his job. He kept his dreams. You lie there now thinking of him. Would you have done the same? Denied a summons from someone with the power to exile you, all because the dream had not yet finished? Would you value the quiet of your sleeping thoughts over the noise of court politics? You're not sure, but you like the idea of it. The courage it implies. You shift slightly beneath the quilt. Not enough to make noise, just enough to realign your shoulder against the mat. Your fingers rest softly on the fabric. Your pulse, calm, slow, certain. There's something deeply political about protecting your sleep. Not in the way of protest or defiance, but in the quiet declaration that your inner world matters. That stillness, too, deserves its hour. You remember your teacher once saying, "The scholar who cannot defend his rest cannot defend his reason." At the time, you nodded as though you understood. Now you actually might. In the silence of your sarangche, surrounded by scrolls and folded robes, you realize how little of your day is truly yours. Letters to write, students to train, couriers arriving with messages, errands, expectations. But this hour, this moment between ink and oblivion, it's yours. No one can summon you here. No one can judge you here. Not even the king. You wonder what you would say if someone banged on your door right now, demanding your presence for some urgent matter. Would you rise, wrap yourself in your formal robes, step barefoot into the cold morning? Or would you, like the dream-purifying scholar, remain exactly where you are, whispering, "Not now. I'm aligning myself." It's a lovely thought, one you'll probably never get to test. But in this moment, it feels true. The wind doesn't challenge you. The beams above you do not creak. Even the bamboo pillow seems to soften slightly in approval. You close your eyes again. No summons comes. No interruption follows. And for once, your dreams are allowed to finish what they started. You wake not with a jolt, but a gradual awareness, like a candle flickering back to life. Your eyes stay closed a few extra moments, just enough to feel the weight of your breath settle in your chest, just enough to know the dream has ended. No voices this time. No flying ink or drifting scrolls. Just a kind of peaceful nothingness, like the surface of a still pond before a stone is tossed in. And yet there's a lingering question in your chest. Was that all? You sit up slowly. Your knees creak again this time, less like complaint and more like old wood remembering its purpose. The quilt slides into your lap, cool now from the night's retreat. You stretch your arms overhead and hear the faintest pop from your spine, satisfying, discreet, necessary. It's still early. The sun hasn't yet reached the courtyard, but the light outside the hanji doors is brighter than before, pale gold, like rice paper brushed with diluted ink. You rise, and you notice subtly, unmistakably, that something has shifted in the air. A hush, not silence exactly, but a held breath. The house feels paused, the wind absent, the birds for once respectfully delayed in their songs. You walk across the room, your robe rustling gently against your ankles, and slide open the door. There's a small envelope sitting just outside, placed on the wooden porch, with careful symmetry. No name, no seal, just folded paper tied with a plain string. You hesitate only a moment before picking it up. The paper is cool in your hand, smooth, faintly textured. You carry it back inside, sit at your desk, and untie the knot. Inside a single sheet, a poem. No sender. You read, "When sleep comes gently, do not name it. When dreams arise, do not own them. Let them drift, like breath between two verses, like a pause in the ink before the final stroke." You stare at the lines for a long time, not because you don't understand them, but because you do. You read it again, then fold the paper carefully and tuck it between the pages of your dream journal somewhere near the middle, where it won't be found by accident, but also won't be forgotten. These little surprises are not uncommon in your life. Fellow scholars often leave short verses, provocations, or riddles at each other's doors, a quiet game of intellect and introspection. No fanfare, no declarations, just meaning delivered softly. You suspect this one came from the junior scholar across the courtyard, the one who insists he doesn't believe in dreams, yet always asks about yours. You'll reply, "Not now, later," maybe in the form of a question, or a borrowed line from the book of songs that sounds like wisdom, but masks a gentle taunt. You sit at your desk and breathe in. The bedding has been folded. The scrolls remain undisturbed. The tea kettle simmers quietly nearby, sending up soft spirals of steam, like a visual echo of the poem you've just read. You don't need to write anything now. Not a line. Not a commentary. Not even a critique of your own sleep posture from last night. Instead, you sit in stillness and let the idea of sleep, its rhythm, its ritual, its refusal to be owned, settle like dust across your thoughts. You once believed that dreams were things to be captured, recorded, decoded. Now perhaps you begin to wonder if they're better left untranslated, allowed to drift through your mind like wind through the pine needles, heard but not harnessed. You trace your finger along the edge of your desk, and then, just because it feels right, you whisper the poem once aloud, not to the room, not to yourself, but to whatever quiet force delivered it. The day moves forward, but you linger in the sarangche longer than usual, reluctant to surrender the quiet. The sunlight has begun its steady crawl across the floor, illuminating your robe, the edge of the bedding, and the corner where a cobweb hangs like a forgotten punctuation mark. You don't brush it away. Today is not a day for disturbance. You sit with your back straight, hands folded in your lap, breathing slowly. There's no schedule until the second bell. No visitors. No chores you haven't already deferred to tomorrow. It's in this in-between moment that the house truly reveals itself, not as wood and stone, but as a living rhythm, walls breathing floor, settling light, shifting like a scholar adjusting their sleeves. Mid-recitation, your thoughts drift unmoored. You think of your cousin, the one who stayed over 2 nights ago, curled up beside your mat with all the grace of a thunderclap. He snored like a sea monster, tossed and turned like someone wrestling dreams into submission, and worst of all, had the audacity to fall asleep before you did, then wake up refreshed. You'd been patient. You'd smiled at breakfast. You'd said things like, "I'm so glad you came." But in your dream journal, you'd written, "Sounded like a temple bell being struck by a falling cow." You're not proud of that entry, but you also didn't erase it. The memory makes you smile now softly, privately. You forgive him? Mostly. After all, the Sarangche isn't built for two. It's a sanctuary, a chamber designed for single occupancy thought. And in truth, that one night of disrupted sleep reminded you how precious silence is. How easy it is to forget the blessings of a room that doesn't echo with someone else's breathing. Still, you've since added a note to the servant. No overnight guests without 3 days' notice. Your cousin may not return until the chrysanthemums bloom. And even then, you'll lend him a mat on the other side of the courtyard. This little anecdote joins 100 others like it, part of your private archive of small intrusions and quiet rebalances. You stretch your legs forward, allowing the hem of your robe to ride up slightly. Scandalous if anyone were watching. But they aren't. The walls are trustworthy. The wind is polite. And even though your guest is long gone, you find yourself listening just in case he's planning a surprise return, armed with conversation and irregular breathing patterns. Nothing. Just the house settling. Just your breath. Just enough. You rise and refold the bedding, smoothing out even the hint of a wrinkle from where your cousin had slept. You press it with a flat palm, not because anyone will see it, but because you will know. The mat must be returned to its former state, a space free of other people's chaos. There is a concept in your scholarly circles, 청정, or quietude with clarity. It's a prized state of mind often described as the height of personal cultivation. To achieve it is to be undisturbed by distraction, unclouded by passion, unaffected by the pull of ego. Historians still debate whether anyone truly attained it, or whether it was just something men claimed in front of their juniors. But in this moment, standing in your sarangche freshly alone, you feel something close to it. You whisper the word once under your breath. 청정. It lands softly on the air. 노해줘. Just presence. You sit again, not out of obligation, but out of return. The desk welcomes you. The scrolls breathe quietly in their stacks. And your dream from last night, odd shape-shifting, half-remembered, feels like it belongs again. As if it too was waiting for the room to return to one heartbeat. No interruptions, no snoring, no guest with tangled robes and gossip about provincial officials. Just you, and sleep past and future resting nearby. You return to the mat not to nap, not to think, but simply to lie there. As the sun inches across the room, the warmth pools around your knees, your chest, your cheekbone, pressed gently against the bamboo pillow. The room feels right. No movement, no disturbance. Only the slow creak of wood as it adjusts to the day's rising temperature. Outside, cicadas begin to hum. They arrive like a distant chorus. One voice at first, then two, then many. You know this sound. Well, it's the rhythm of summer preparing itself. Not the overwhelming buzz of midday, but the softer prelude. Like a kettle heating, not yet boiling. You close your eyes and let the sound wash over you. This is one of those secret truths no one writes into the scrolls. Ambient sound helps, not disrupts, not disturbs. It helps. It fills the space where restless thoughts used to echo. And scholars need that space filled sometimes, especially when we pretend we don't. You lie still, letting the cicadas sing you back into a half-sleep. The window near your feet is cracked just enough to let air in, and the scent of pine and dust drifts into the sarangche like a polite guest. Everything is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Trees, air, insects, floor you. It's this ambient harmony that so often gets overlooked in historical texts. Scholars loved silence, yes, but what they truly treasured was stillness. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of friction. And the cicadas, believe it or not, are part of that. You once read a short note in the margin of an old volume on household governance. Let the summer bugs speak. Their chaos is more honest than ours. You underlined it. Twice. It seemed funny then. Now it feels like truth. You feel the light on your face shift as a cloud moves overhead. The room dims slightly, but the warmth lingers. Somewhere beyond the wall, a neighbor's rooster squawks once and is immediately shushed either by a scolding human or a superior bird. You smile, eyes still closed. The pillow beneath you remains firm. Of course, it doesn't yield not even to morning dreams, but you've stopped expecting comfort from it. That, too, is part of the lesson. In this drifting state, neither fully awake nor fully dreaming, you begin to feel time loosen its grip. The scrolls don't need you right now. The ink can wait. Even your thoughts have quieted to a hum. You focus on the rhythm around you. Buzz of cicadas, creak of floorboard, flicker of curtain, heartbeat, breath, stillness. You begin to understand something else. This moment is what many of your writings try to describe but never quite reach. Not wisdom, not sleep, not insight, but rest, unjudged, undisturbed, undescribed. You think about a line from an early poem you wrote as a teenager long before you'd earned your scholarly robe. If the wind is kind and the world is quiet, I will sleep with both eyes closed. You thought it was childish then. You dismissed it, even tried to rewrite it into something more elegant, more Confucian. But here now, lying on the mat with the sun warming your knees and the insects harmonizing outside, you realize it was perfect. Even if you didn't know why, you let the line play once more in your head, like a lullaby read backward. Then with no announcement, you drift off again. Just for a moment, just long enough to let the world take care of itself. You awaken this time to thunder, not the loud crashing kind that rattles eaves and upends teacups, but the distant roll of a summer storm stretching its muscles beyond the mountain ridge. It arrives as a low hum beneath the floorboards, like a thought you didn't know you were having. Then it speaks again, closer now, fuller, a sound that moves through the belly first, then the ears. You lie still beneath the quilt listening. The Sarangche darkens subtly. Clouds drift over the sun, turning the warm light to pewter. Shadows soften spread. The wood of the ceiling groans again, unsettled by the change in pressure. Even the air smells different, wet charged as though the world has been briefly unplugged and plugged back in again. You sit up slowly. The sky outside the paper windows is now the color of old ink, faded, streaked, uncommitted. You have always had a complicated relationship with storms. As a child, they frightened you. As a student, they frustrated you, interrupting your copywork with leaks and chilly. But as a scholar grown into his solitude, you've come to appreciate them. Storms are the only things that make even the most self-important officials cancel appointments. They are equalizers, excuses, teachers. You rise and light the lamp again, not because you need it yet, but because it feels polite to the storm, to the moment. The soft glow brings the corners of the room back into view. The folded robes, the journal, the still damp tea bowl. Another rumble rolls through. You walk to the window and slide it open slightly. The breeze that rushes in is cool and heavy with the scent of earth and roof tile. It carries a dampness that seeps into the joints, into the folds of your robe, into the breath. You stand there a moment longer, breathing it in. Storms always make you feel a little more aware of the structure of the house, of the quality of your thoughts, of the fragility of your walls. There's an old belief passed down by traveling monks that thunder reveals hidden things, that it startles the soul into honesty, that if you're lying to yourself, the sky will notice. Historians still argue whether this is superstition or metaphor. You're not sure, but you know that during storms your mind sharpens, or softens, or both. You sit back at the desk and reopen your scroll from the morning. The ink has dried, but the thoughts are still warm. You reread a few lines and feel the thunder vibrating faintly through your ribcage. You pick up your brush again, dip it into the inkstone, and write. The house is quiet until the sky remembers it. Another rumble closer this time. You continue writing, nothing structured, nothing formal. Just fragments, impressions, thoughts you wouldn't normally allow onto the page when the sun is out and the routine is firm. When thunder arrives, the roof listens. The mat grows colder before the rain. I sleep better when the world is louder than me. You pause. That last one surprises you. You write it again slightly differently. Only when the world is louder than me can I sleep without apology. You stop writing, not because you're out of ideas, but because the rain has started and there's something holy about that first pattern of droplets tapping the tile roof. It starts slowly. Tap, 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 tap. Then it builds. A percussion of soft, erratic rhythms. No predictability, no performance. Just water falling onto clay and stone and leaves and promises. You return to the mat and lie down, arms folded under your head, watching the ceiling beams pulse in dim lamplight as the storm grows. And now you don't think about virtue, or posture, or dreams. You just listen, and slowly, so slowly, your body relaxes, not from fatigue, not from ritual, but from permission. The rain says, "You are small," and that is good. The thunder says, "You are temporary," and that is enough. And you, with nothing more to prove today, fall asleep again. No ceremony, no effort, just the storm and the scholar breathing in sync. You don't know how long you've slept this time, only that when your eyes open, the storm has passed and the room feels different. Not just drier, not just lighter, quieter. It's the kind of quiet that doesn't beg to be filled. The air is thick with the scent of rain-drenched wood soil, and something else, a faint trace of green tea perhaps from the neighboring house. Everything smells cleaner, not new but reset. You sit up slowly, your joints less reluctant now. Your mind still resting in that softened space between waking and waking. You fold your hands in your lap and look around the sarangche, as if seeing it for the first time today. There's a weight to the silence after rain, not a burden more like a soft, damp quilt draped across the world. It smooths out the sharp edges of your thoughts. And in this stillness, you remember something important. It's nap hour. Yes, even scholars nap. Though officially termed meditative rest, the midday nap is one of the few indulgences that Confucian minds will permit, so long as it's short-structured and never mistaken for laziness. You lie back down, feeling no guilt. The bedding is still warm from earlier. The mat still holds the shape of your rest. The bamboo pillow, as always, maintains its rigid world view. Your robe is slightly twisted at the waist, but you make no move to fix it. This nap doesn't require perfection, just breath. You close your eyes not to sleep immediately, but to settle, to let the storm's ghost hum fade fully from your thoughts. And as you lie there, you remember how your teacher once insisted that naps were a gift from the ancients that sages paused, not because they were tired, but because wisdom needs space to bloom. Let the rice digest, he'd mutter. Let the ideas simmer. Let your back forgive you. Historians still argue whether midday rest was encouraged by court scholars or merely tolerated with a kind of cultural side-eye. You think it depends on who's asking and whether they've recently eaten. Because this nap, this moment, is not about rest alone. It's a pause, a punctuation mark in the day's grammar, a small breath between thoughts. You think about the courtyard, how the leaves must look now wet and glossy, clinging to the branches like paper pinned to silk. You think about your servant likely sweeping puddles into garden paths. You think about the poem still tucked inside your dream journal. And then you stop thinking altogether. The nap comes over you not with a blanket of exhaustion, but with a slow, persuasive rhythm. Like being read to in a language you almost remember. Your fingers twitch once. Your feet settle. Your breath steadies. And this time, there are no dreams, no strange gardens, no drifting ink, just stillness, which in its own way is rarer. You sleep for only 20 minutes, maybe 30. But when you wake again, the room hasn't moved. The world has waited. And so have your thoughts, neatly lined up like scrolls on a shelf ready to be opened when you are. You stretch slowly, sit up, retie your robe sash, and smile. Because naps may not be poetic, but today they were perfect. You sit upright after the nap spine, straight vision clear. Not because you forced yourself into alertness, but because that short, sacred pause worked. Your body feels reset like a page turned and pressed flat. You step outside into the corridor between your study and the guest quarters, letting your bare feet rest against the smooth, warm wood of the veranda. The storm's residue lingers in the air, clean, rich, cool enough to remind you that nature has recently rewritten everything. This isn't your usual sleeping space, of course, but you've taken naps here before. The narrow ledge lined with an old reed mat in summer months becomes a perfect little platform when the wind is soft and the light not too sharp. You stretch your arms over your head again. Somewhere in the garden, a bird sings with excessive confidence. You recognize the call, an oriental magpie. Loud, flashy, unapologetically vocal. You've always respected that about them. You too have things to say. You've just written them all down instead. You glance over at the smaller sleeping mat set aside for travel. Rolled and tied neatly with a cotton strip, it waits patiently for its next use. It reminds you of nights on the road, visits to other scholars, to remote schools, to temple libraries hidden halfway up a mountain slope. Travel sleep you've found is an entirely different beast. You once tried resting on a woven mat in an old mountain inn. The pillow was stuffed with millet husks. The blanket smelled of roasted barley. There was no lamp, only the moon shining in through a lattice window, casting your silhouette onto a stranger's floor. You hardly slept that night. Not from discomfort, but from the absence of everything familiar. No creak from the left beam of your ceiling. No wind from the southern crack in your study wall. No comfort in the smell of your own robe aired in the same sunlight for years. You learned something important that night. You don't need luxury to sleep well. You need recognition. The space around you must say, "You belong here." Historians still argue whether scholars grew too attached to their personal study spaces, or whether that attachment was essential for cultivating discipline. You fall firmly in the second camp. The sarangche isn't just shelter, it's rhythm, reassurance, routine. You return inside now, passing your writing desk without sitting. You're not in the mood to write. Not just yet. Instead, you kneel beside your travel bundle and unroll it. Not to prepare for a journey, only to air it out to remember. The mat unfolds with a soft thud, releasing a puff of stored scent. Dust, cedar, and old sweat. Not unpleasant. Just honest. You lie down on it briefly, letting your back press into its stiffer texture. Less forgiving than your main bedding, but not without character. You close your eyes. You imagine you're on the road again, sleeping beneath the stars' scrolls bundled under your head, the sound of frogs echoing from a nearby rice paddy. You open your eyes. Still here. Still your room. But for a moment, the memory was enough. You sit up again and begin rolling the mat, this time slower, with intention. You smooth out the creases, press the corners into shape, retie the cotton cord, and return it to its place beneath the window shelf. Your hands brush against the sleeping robe you wore earlier. You lift it, cotton, faintly wrinkled, still warm with the imprint of your shoulder. You fold it again, slower this time, and place it beside the mat. These simple movements, folding, tucking, straightening, remind you that sleep, like writing, is a practice, an art, one that improves not through invention, but through attention. You sit back on your mat, knees folded beneath you, and look around the sarangche. It's quiet again, ordered again, ready again, just as it should be. The rain has passed, the bedding is in place, and your robe now rests folded like a chapter finished neatly before the next begins. You sit in the sarangche with your legs tucked beneath you and let your gaze wander not toward the shelves or the scrolls, but to the small wooden altar tucked into the quietest corner of the room. It's not grand, not ornate, just a shelf slightly elevated, draped with a square of undyed cloth. On it rest 3 ancestral tablets, small upright wooden plaques, each etched with a name carved long before your own handwriting had weight. Your grandfather, his father, and his father's father. The room still smells of rain and old ink, but now it holds another scent too faint and woody. You lit incense earlier almost without thinking, and its smoke has long since faded into the air. But the feeling remains. You bow gently, not out of obligation, but out of something more difficult to name. You're thinking of dreams again, specifically the one from last week. The one where your great-uncle stood in a dry riverbed wearing someone else's hat, quoting Confucius while trying to catch fish with a writing brush. You woke confused, amused, and oddly unsettled. You almost didn't write it down, but you did, and now, with the post-storm silence wrapped around you, it surfaces again, this time with a faint sense of omen, or maybe just indigestion. Dreams have always held meaning in your culture, even if that meaning is inconsistent. Some say that dreaming of hats means change. Others say it means confusion. Still others say it means you ate too fast before bed. Historians still argue whether dreams in your era were seen as divine messages or psychological detritus. The reality, as always, floats somewhere in between. You've had dreams that came true, at least in feeling, if not in fact. You've dreamed of students before they arrived, of places before you visited, of conversations you would swear later had already happened. And you've had dreams that meant nothing, absolutely nothing. Entire nights wasted on stories your brain stitched together like a bored child with scraps of silk. But then there are dreams like the one with the hat, strange enough to remember, symbolic enough to wonder. You bow once more toward the altar, murmuring quietly, "If it meant something, I'm listening. If not, thank you for the quiet." You don't expect an answer. You've long accepted that the dead are like bamboo pillows, supportive in theory, unforgiving in practice. Still, the act of saying it brings a small clarity to your chest, a calm. You sit there a while longer, the room dimming slightly as afternoon begins to stretch its shadow fingers across the floor. The wind has returned, not bold, just present, brushing gently against the paper doors like a hand at rest. You think of other omens now. The night the roof tiles shook 3 times. The time you saw a fox in the courtyard, its eyes too intelligent, its steps too quiet. The tea leaves that once floated in the shape of the character for doubt. You're not superstitious, or at least you say you're not, but you leave the dream journal open anyway, in case. Because sometimes when sleep ends, the message hasn't finished arriving. And sometimes the only way to receive it is to wait. So you do. The hours pass gently like drifting smoke until the light begins its long slanted descent across the room. Afternoon has deepened into early evening. You feel it in your ribs first. Not as weariness, but as a pulling inward, as though the day itself is wrapping up scrolls and extinguishing wicks. You light the lamp again. Just a small flame, no fanfare. The oil is low now, but there's enough for the evening rituals. You'll add more tomorrow, maybe, if you remember. You rise slowly, joints cracking like a respectful drum roll, and begin to prepare for something that always feels far away until it doesn't. Death. Not as a fear, not even as an inevitability, but as a practice. You've spent your life thinking about sleep, studying its posture, honoring its routine. But in your world, sleep is not just rest, it's rehearsal. You cross the room to a long, low drawer near your writing desk. Inside is your death robe, soft cotton, undyed, folded precisely like your sleeping robe. It is nearly identical, but it has never been worn. It waits. And tonight, as you do every few months, you unfold it. Gently, reverently. You hold it in your hands, not as a scholar, not as a poet, but as a body that will one day stop breathing. This is not morbid. It is mindful. There's a quiet teaching in the Book of Rites that says, to prepare for the end is to live rightly in the middle. You've always liked that phrasing. Middle, not beginning, not end. Just now. You don't put the robe on. You simply examine it. Check for moth holes. Smooth out any imagined creases. Refold it. Return it to its drawer. Done. It takes 5 minutes. But it reminds you that all your scrolls, all your sleep, all your silence, it's all a kind of soft training. You return to your mat. The sun is almost gone now. The light has turned amber, warm and long-limbed. You lie down with your arms at your sides, head resting firmly against the bamboo pillow. You close your eyes not to nap, not to dream, but to feel what it's like to be still. Fully still. This posture, flat composed quilt folded precisely at the waist, is the same posture you'll take on your final night. And that's okay. You've never feared death. You've feared disorder. You've feared not having time to finish the last scroll. You've feared being remembered for a half-finished thought. But death, no. You've been preparing for it every time you've smoothed out your bedding, every time you've bowed to the east, every time you've quieted your breath and waited for the dream to come. The room darkens further. The lamp flickers. You think of your teacher's last night. He lay in the same posture, said nothing profound, only this. The body is a borrowed robe. Sleep returns it gently. You never forgot that. You whisper it now to the ceiling. Sleep returns it gently. A breeze stirs the paper screen beside you. The plum tree outside rustles softly, scattering a few blossoms to the damp soil. You imagine them falling not like endings, but like syllables closing a sentence. You let your breath fall into rhythm again. This time there is no dream, only stillness, only breath, only readiness. You wake from the stillness not with a start, but with a kind of softness that feels borrowed, like something loaned to you by the tree outside or the ink on your desk. The room is dark now, but not in a way that hides. It embraces. The lamp has burned down to a blue flicker, its wick curling like an old question you no longer feel the need to answer. You sit up slowly, shoulders relax the mat beneath you, creased but warm. Your robe has slipped slightly off one shoulder. You adjust it without urgency. This is the last waking of the day, not the jarring slap of morning or the pulled from dream confusion of midnight. This is the small waking, the one that simply asks, "Are you ready to end today?" You are. You stand stretch once and begin what little needs doing. The bedding is smoothed again. The brush is rinsed and hung. The scrolls are not opened. They've said enough for one day. Then before you lie down again, you do one final task. You take out the box. It's a small wooden chest no larger than a folded robe. Inside it are your journals. Not the daily logs or the poetry drafts, but the legacy scrolls. The ones written not for now, but for after. You unfold one slowly. The edges are worn, the characters even, and deliberate. You read a few lines not to revise them, but to remember who you were when you wrote them. Let no one inherit silence. Leave them words soft enough to sleep beside. You smile. That one surprised you when it came out. You read a little more. You touch the ink with your fingertip, not enough to smudge, just enough to feel it. Then you roll it up again, place it back into the chest, and close the lid. Not everything needs to be shared now. Some words, like certain dreams, are meant to be found later. You return to the mat and settle in for the final sleep of the day. Not dramatic, not ritualized, just clean and simple. The bamboo pillow finds its usual place beneath your neck. The quilt folds over your chest with practiced ease. The room exhales. So do you. There is a belief among some scholars, one never written down, only whispered between naps, that the sleep at the end of a day reveals more than all the dreams inside it. That final sleep, they say, is where you meet yourself, not the version you presented, not the one you polished, but the you that existed when no one else was watching, the you that just was. Historians still argue whether this was ever more than a bedtime saying. But tonight, lying here beneath the slow rise and fall of your own breath, you think it's the most honest line you've ever heard. Your thoughts for once are not racing. There are no final lines to scribble, no lines of poetry fighting to be born. Just warmth, quiet, stillness. You think of the entire day not as a list of tasks, but as a shape. Round, steady, unbroken. Like the moon you now see slipping through the window, its edge glowing faintly across your mat. You whisper something to it. You don't remember what, and then, peacefully, fully, you let yourself go. Not into unconsciousness, not into philosophy, just into rest. And the room holds you exactly as it always has. You don't open your eyes this time. You don't need to. The room is exactly as you left it, quiet, cool breathing softly around you. The night has settled in fully now, not just outside the sarangche, but within it. Every beam, every corner, every fold of your robe feels wrapped in calm. There's nothing left to arrange, nothing to tidy. Even your thoughts are folded neatly, stacked like scrolls returned to the shelf. This is the final sleep of the day. You lie flat on the mat, arms resting gently by your sides, the bamboo pillow offering its usual unforgiving clarity beneath your neck. The quilt is tucked around you like a sentence completed, nothing more to add, nothing to revise. And for once, you don't reach for meaning. You don't rehearse philosophy or revisit lines from your journal. You don't listen for ghosts in the wind or try to interpret the creak of the beams. You simply exist, breathing, still, present. Outside, the plum tree sways in the faintest breeze, its blossoms now a quiet memory against the black sky. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a fox pads silently through wet grass, unseen and unbothered. The world is not waiting for you. It is simply continuing. And that's enough. The lamp has burned out. The shadows have thickened. But nothing feels lost. In fact, everything feels more whole. You think briefly about the many nights you've spent chasing sleep, managing sleep, organizing your life around its rituals. And you wonder if all along sleep was not something to be captured, but something to be trusted, like gravity, like silence, like the quiet hum of the sarangche itself, its old wood, its cool floor, its patient corners that watched you grow from student to scholar to something in between. You've slept here through every season. In summer's heat, winter's frost, spring's damp winds, autumn's thin light. You've dreamed and not dreamed. You've risen early and stayed awake late. You've known insomnia, and you've known the peace of a perfectly still night like this one. Now finally you allow yourself the full weight of rest. No preparation, no instruction, just breath. And with that final exhale, the house sleeps too. The plum blossoms stop rustling. The ink dries. The scholar sleeps. And the world is for once completely quiet. If this quiet stayed with you tonight, if it helped you breathe a little slower, sleep a little deeper, consider subscribing, not for the algorithm, for the stillness. And if you're still awake, drop it in the comments. Let me know you made it to the end. Sleep well. Until next time.